Welcome to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life. This is the place to be for stories to inspire and uplift when life doesn't go according to our plans. I'm Laura Muirhead, your host and the reigning queen of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life. I can't wait to share the plot twist stories of my guests that will inspire and uplift you when life didn't follow the plan, right here on A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life podcast. Welcome to another episode of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life podcast. I'm Laura Muirhead, your host, and I am so excited and honored to welcome Kristy Iris to our episode today. So, Kristy, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your world.
Thank you. My world, I feel like it really starts, I was always a theater kid, so I feel like I'm a little theatrical. It eventually evolved from on stage to backstage to designing and directing. In high school, I really got into designing, mostly costume design, and I did some directing, which I loved. I got to do summer stock in the summers, and I realized that that was really what I wanted to do with my life. I did have a little guilty feeling about it because I wanted to help people more than designing make-believe worlds for make-believe people. And my dad said to me, well, you know, those people who really help people will come see a show or watch a movie or a TV show that you've done, and that helps them relax and do their work better. So I was like, okay, but I always wanted to help people more. There was just something more about being of service. And I figured that out. I figured out how to bring my theater world and my desire to help real people come together. Yes.
So now, right now, what is your business?
What I like to say is I collaborate with conscious creatives to connect home and soul. So I help real people look at how their life and the setting, their homes, are speaking to them subconsciously, how they are able to be used as a manifesting tool, a healing modality, a creative medium to better our lives, to manifest what we want, and just really have a sense of deep comfort in our homes.
Oh, I love that. Now, we have known each other for a couple of years as an online friends, right. And this is really our first opportunity to speak live, and I'm so excited for that. And I'm just going to let you go ahead and share your A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life experience.
Yeah, I did have a funny thing on the way to my life because I thought I had my life. I'm a planner. I think because I found out at the age of 46, I'm 49 at this recording, almost 50. I found out that I had ADHD, which was no surprise. And I also have a traumatic brain injury from a car accident when I was 4 years old because, you know, car seats in 1976, not a big deal, you know, seat belts. No, you're asleep at night coming home from, your parents are coming home from a party and you're asleep on the back seat of the car. And so, so I had felt like there were some things that were just always a challenge for me and some things that were just really easy, and creativity and imagination was always something that just was really easy for me. And I just fell in love with designing costumes. In particular, in high school, I went away for the summers. I had a challenging relationship with my mom growing up. We've had an amazing, miraculous healing, and I actually live in the same town as my parents do now, and they are wonderful grandparents to what they like to say their long-awaited only grandchild. So I became a mom at 41. I did life a little. I've done some things early, like I started graduate school at 18 and I became a mom at 41. So I'm not really one for following that conventional path. I've never had a
no pressure from your parents to have children, obviously. No pressure.
But it's also hard to want to tie down a free spirit and say, like, have children. So, but there was definitely some hints along the way. But I have not led a conventional life, because part of, well, just being in entertainment is doing freelance work. You do a job, and it's 8 to 10 to 12 weeks. So, and then and often they overlap. So in order to get out of the house after my junior year of high school, I went and did summer stock, which is summer theater, musical theater, for 10 weeks. It was magical. It was, I lost my virginity. It was like summer love affair kind of thing. It was fabulous, and I worked with all these wonderful older women. And then I came back. High school was really hard, and I knew that I needed something different. And I always knew I wanted to live in a city. So I started applying to colleges, and I applied to NYU's undergraduate theater design program. I had grown up outside of New York City, about an hour and a half, and I had been running around the city. My parents didn't know this. They thought my friend and I were always going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But we were running around the city, exploring all parts of New York City in the late 1980s, not that safe. I learned how to ride the subways and get all over. So when it came time for my mom to come with me to go to my portfolio review, to show the theater program what I had done, and she's like, how do you know your way around? I'm like, I don't know, I just love it so much. It took about 10 years for me to fess up that I had been running around the city since I was 13. But
you knew all the ins and outs of the subway, just magically came to you.
Just magically. I knew how to get from Port Authority to the subway to transfer, to get out and find my way exactly across the park. Washington Square Park, that is. So as I was interviewing, they were telling me about this graduate program that they accepted 1 or 2 undergraduates every year. And it was really hard, and you had to grow up faster, and you were just with all these graduate students. And, it was really hard. And I'm thinking, that sounds great to me. So, but I didn't know how to get into that. So they called me and invited me to present my portfolio, and I got accepted.
Wow, how exciting.
Yes, and I got enough of a scholarship, because it's a very expensive school. I got enough of a scholarship to be able to go. So there I was at 18. I moved to New York. I lived on Washington Square Park and in the Village, and I started this amazing graduate program. It's the #2 graduate program in the country, and second to Yale, in case you're wondering. So it was Tisch School of the Arts, and for 5 years, I did 7 years worth of undergraduate and graduate school. And because I was an undergraduate, we weren't supposed to design outside of the program. Probably not a surprise at this point. I did.
A little bit of a rebel here, are we?
I was able to kind of fly under the radar enough that I designed a ton of experimental, avant-garde, off-Broadway shows and Broadway shows. I worked for a Broadway costume shop and ran around the garment district shopping for fabrics for all kinds of things, from Beauty and the Beast on Broadway to the circus, Disney on Ice. It was pretty amazing.
Sounds really magical, and like the perfect dream life for someone like you at the time.
Totally. I mean, to be unleashed, and then in this world of studying with professors that were, Broadway designers, and one of my professors was designing a new opera at the Metropolitan Opera. I mean, that happens, I don't know, maybe once every 20 years. So he got to take us on tours. We got to watch dress rehearsals. I got to stand in the middle of the Metropolitan Opera stage. I mean, it was just
wow. And
we had an access to shows and cultural things, and we were forced to do it too. I mean, my one professor would just say in passing, "Oh, there's this show at the Guggenheim, and make sure you check it out." And 2 weeks later, after the show closed, he'd give us a blank piece of paper and say, "Draw the floor plan of the show, of the exhibit." And that was, so you had to go, if you had to be aware.
There was no getting out of it. He knew you didn't go if you didn't go.
Right. Yeah. So I was forced to just be completely immersed in the arts world of New York, and then getting to be a working artist as well. And eventually that's how I paid the rest of my bills, was through being a working artist.
Wow. Wow.
So, but needless to say, I took basically 24 credits a semester. And the first 4 years I took all graduate classes in one academic a semester. So that was considered conservatory training. And then I got my bachelor's degree, and then I went one extra year and I did a thesis show and had to have a thesis portfolio.
Wow.
And then I graduated. And I also we had an exchange program with Columbia. Their graduate and PhD program didn't have designers for their directors. So I got to study directing at Columbia.
But that's a really heavy load. I mean,
oh yeah. There were times I was designing, I slept 20 hours a week for 2 years straight. I'd sleep 4 hours a night, 5 nights a week, and then do 2 all-nighters. And I burned myself out. I also ran out of, since it was a 3-year program, I ran out of costume design classes. So first I was really fascinated with lighting design. So I talked my way into the lighting design class for lighting designers, not non-major. I don't know how anyway. And then I ended up taking a lighting design track, and I also got to study set design. So instead of having one specialization, I got to do 3. And then I got to design costume sets and lighting in New York.
Okay, so I just have a question here. Like, you discovered later in life that you were ADHD. Do you feel like your ADHD at that time was maybe helpful because you were doing all these things and like literally, just doing more, and clearly doing it well for you to be able to graduate. It wasn't like you weren't doing them. You did them well.
Yes, thank you. The theater design happens to be a perfect career for somebody with ADHD. I did not know that, because there's so many different parts to the process that you start by having to analyze a script and take that apart. My favorite part of the whole process is the collaborative aspect. I am technically a visual artist who loves to collaborate. So I am the visual artist with the performers. Mm-hmm. It's that collaboration that happens when 2 or more crazy artists are getting together with a vision in mind, that such magic happens when you start collaborating and creating a space where, like, I love bad ideas. Honestly, they get me off so much, because a bad idea can just give you so much light on what something is not, and then you can go, oh, that's what it is.
That's funny.
So yeah, having that space where you can just throw out everything. You just throw out everything that comes to your mind, and it's often those really terrible ideas that give birth.
No judgment, and just throw it out there. No judgment, which is also incredible space, like you say, an incredible space to be able to create, because it's not like somebody's necessarily saying, well, that's an awful idea, and you're just shut down. You just keep creating from that.
Right. And I did a lot of experimental theater, which is like basically low budget, avant-garde, weird ass shit that we did in like little theaters and basements of tenement buildings on the Lower East Side. And I've never done an Elizabethan Shakespearean. I've done so much Shakespeare. I've done Macbeth backwards based on the director's acid trip. So they started at the end and they went to the beginning. I've done Hamlet.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I've done Hamlet that was inspired by the music and the work of Einstein on the beach and Philip Glass's music. There's a whole structure within of how that play is set, that there's like these what are called me plays. I mean, this is so complex. I've done Lear set that the family was an accounting family. I've also done brand new work. I mean, it just, so much great creative stuff that was not going to get picked up to go to Broadway. It's not like Rent. I remember when Rent was a little off Broadway show. I used to pass it every day on my way to school, and then it became this big thing, and it's still this big thing, and it wasn't like that. These were smaller theaters that we knew there was no way it was going to get picked up and taken to Broadway. So the creative freedom was just a dream come true. Yeah. A dream come true. I mean, so I've had that. And of course, I'm creating, there's not a lot of money involved either. So, there's not huge budgets. So I learned how to do a lot with a little. Yeah. I also ran the costume rental shop at NYU. That was my work study. So we loaned out costumes to like film students and other actors and stuff. So I had at my access a whole stock of costumes. It made it a lot easier.
Oh my gosh, how fun. How fun.
Yeah. So that thing of the ADHD, I'm doing different shows that are in different processes. And then the whole process of designing a show, you start with the script and analyzing the script and understanding. What I love about costumes is not because I'm some fashionista, honestly. It's because I love how a costume expresses in metaphor who this human being is. I loved getting into the humanness of these characters and the stories and how they expressed themselves, and often how their costume changed as their character evolved through a show.
That's
Yeah, and what I loved about lighting, even more than set design, ironically, is that lighting to me is about painting with emotion.
I love it. I love it.
A warm light is going to make you feel much differently than a cool light, or a light that has a harsh shadow versus a soft shadow, and how lights can move along with a play. I just love that part of it.
So interesting. Yeah. And it's true. Like if you go, if you've ever, even in a movie, if somebody hasn't seen a Broadway show, but even in movies, how they change the lighting, and maybe they go from a dark beginning to as the plot evolves, or as the characters evolve, into maybe the end is super light because they've evolved from whatever their challenge was or something, and I don't know anything about it, but just based on what you're saying, I can see that in the movies that I've seen, or the Broadway, a couple of Broadway plays that I have seen. It's interesting because you're talking about Rent, and the one experience that we had with wanting to go to a show in New York. We were going to go just for the weekend, my husband and I, and we thought, well, let's see if there's anything we'd like to see. And this show that I'd never heard of, Hamilton, popped up on my radar. And I read the description of it, and I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting, but I wasn't sure if my husband would be interested in seeing it. And so I kind of said, hey, what do you think about this? And then it just got put on the back burner for a couple days. Literally, when I went back to it, you couldn't get a ticket. Like literally, I was like, and it was just a matter of at the most a week. And I was like, oh, well, we're not going to go see that show that I thought, just a couple days ago we'd get tickets for. And I mean, obviously now, kicking myself because we didn't go see it. And, so that opportunity, it just doesn't, you don't know, something's going to pop up and be super popular.
Yeah. I also saw a lot of bad stuff that seemed like it was sold out and had a lot of expectations, and then
yeah, interesting.
Yeah. It's funny, even yes.
So I was just going to say, so here you are doing all these things in New York, literally juggling everything and being successful at it, but not getting a lot of sleep. And then start to tell us what happened from there.
Yeah. Well, when I was looking ahead at thinking of my life as a career in theater. I thought, okay, well, where would I want to do that? Because it actually at some point didn't occur to me that I had to work in New York or LA. And I went, oh, I love the beach. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and we went to the Jersey Shore every summer for a week, and that was just like, I want to live at the beach. Like, my soul was just so happy at the beach. And I thought, I want to live at the beach and do theater. Like, that just sounded to me like the bomb. And I looked on the East Coast, and there just didn't seem to be any big enough regional theaters on the beach that I could work at and make that I could, like, be a resident costume designer and make a living at. So I was like, all right, fine. And I dove into it, and I was like, I'll just live in New York forever, and I'll travel. And the thing is that they don't tell you, or I didn't get the lifestyle that was going to be required in order to do that work. It was and it's so beautiful what is happening because of COVID, that workaholism, especially everyone who, the creative forces that create it, as opposed to talent, which is actors, the people who create what you see, the visuals, all that, the sound, that work ethic is just insane. Insane. And I knew that I always wanted to have a family and have a life, and it just became obvious that was not going to work together.
Well, and I have one more question about that, because you said before the money, wasn't necessarily there. Is there a point where you could have, made the living that you made?
Yeah, what they told us, they were very clear that it took 10 years on average of paying your dues in that industry to be able to be making a good living.
Okay.
And, when I started at 18, I was like, 28 by 30, I'll be fine. That seemed reasonable.
Okay.
So, yeah. And I had it planned out. I thought, in my 40s, I'd like to be able to be, I'll be wanting to maybe slow down a little, and I'll want to be a college professor. That sounded like that was something I definitely wanted to have my master's for, was to be able to teach. I really enjoyed that too. And so, yeah, I became this diehard New Yorker until, there's always a guy, right? There's always a guy.
It's always that guy.
So I was designing a show in Philadelphia, and the lighting designer, I fell in love with him. And really, by the time I finished school, I was burnt out. But at the time, they did not have a great way of transitioning us to the professional world. And for me, that life outside of school and not having that comfort. So between being burnt out and just not feeling like I had a mentor really to help me figure out, because I had all these opportunities coming at me, and at the time I was hired supposedly to design this big independent film that was going to be with Whoopi Goldberg and Ed Harris, but they kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, and I kept having to turn down really great work. And I ended up doing the show in Philadelphia, and the lighting designer lived at the Jersey Shore near Atlantic City. And before I knew it, he had gotten me a couple of jobs. Oh my gosh, and there was a college there that I could design at. And there was all this opportunity to do stuff within the casinos, which I was like, but then there were other shows. So I ended up moving in with him, and then all the shows that we were going to do, there were like 5 shows, all fell through in a month. It totally happened. So there I was, and I ended up getting into doing some work. I designed a show at the college, and that was wonderful. But then, I don't know, the people there in charge changed, and they hired different people. But I got jobs working in the casinos, and I ended up designing special events for Harris Casino, and we worked in this funky scene shop that was not so I was completely removed from the casino. We were in the scene shop. It could totally be a sitcom of all the wacky characters building the sets. And I also was a scenic artist. I had gotten to study scenic art, scenic painting. So that's painting the big drops and stuff. So I painted huge drops. And at that time, I had gotten married. It was not going well at all.
You married the guy, Philadelphia guy.
I married the Philadelphia guy who lived at the beach.
Okay.
We bought a house in Brigantine, New Jersey, which is just right there.
South of Atlantic City, right?
Right. Just you had to go through Atlantic City to get to this little tiny island. It was attached. Mm-hmm. And things with him were not so good. I honestly began to fear my life.
Oh no.
It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad.
Wow.
I started wanting to feel more in control of my home. And I stumbled upon this thing called Feng Shui. Mm-hmm. Didn't know it's pronounced Feng Shui. But it just... And I thought it was a really great idea. But the books I was stumbling upon, really had to... all the cures were to make your house look like what I thought like a Chinese restaurant. So I thought, this is a great idea. But I see that everything is really about the intention. Like, okay, there's a wealth corner. So instead of a three-legged frog, which means nothing to me, what does wealth and abundance mean to me? I'm going to put something there. And one of the things that I saw in theater, everything is a metaphor. Everything that you see on a stage is to help tell a story. So I started looking at the story that I wanted, and I wanted to feel adored. And I started putting pictures up around women looking adored, like Klimt the Kitsch. I went for the obvious, but then there was a mermaid being adored on a rock, and a sailor or something. And then I got it certified. I took a class to get certified in this Feng Shui, and I started doing more stuff in my home. And that just opened up a whole spiritual awakening for me. I discovered my husband's mother, who had passed away, had an original copy of Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life with the rainbow hearts on it. Mm-hmm. And I pulled that off, and I started photocopying one page at a time, and I would paint these huge drops, 20 by 30 feet drops, while I was designing these events. And I would paint these huge murals while I would meditate on a paragraph at a time.
Wow. How cool.
Yeah. And I realized the more that I saw all these women being adored in my home, I realized at first he was not capable of adoring me. And later I realized I was not capable of being adored the way I wanted to be adored.
Right, so, because it's not just a one-way street. It's not. I mean, and this is where it comes back to over and over the self-love. And, until we're in that place where we not only love like ourselves even, let alone love ourselves. So you were like really had some ahas at that time. Big ones.
Big ones. I worked with it was all God. It just feels like it just feels like such a cliche. Like just in theater, and there's an amazing documentary on Netflix, I think, about Gina Davis's foundation's work about how women are so underrepresented in the entertainment industry. And I can say I was almost always the only woman on a production staff, on the designers, the directors, the producers, unless I got my friends hired. And even, when I went to school, there were 20 years where a woman did not graduate as a lighting designer.
Wow. Because
the belief was that women should be home making babies and not designing lights on Broadway.
Wow.
Yeah. The first production cast of all women, designers, directors, I think playwright, on a Broadway play, the first time in history was right before COVID.
Oh my goodness.
2020.
Wow.
2020.
And we don't know that. We don't hear that. Honestly, we just don't. Like the people who aren't in that industry and not in that arena, we don't hear that.
No.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And it was a small cast, so they were able to turn one of the dressing rooms into a nursing room because I think one of the designers and the director maybe even had just had babies. So they were able to nurse,
Yeah.
Because there's no nursing room in any theater I've ever been in. I'll tell you
Wow.
that.
Like you think that, like the big, women's revolution came in the 60s and the 70s. No, here we are, 2020. So that's incredible.
Yeah. And I mean, I still see it with shows that my daughter has watched. We talk about it, like, oh, look, there's 4 little boy puppies and there's 1 little girl puppy. That's not like, and I have to say, that's not real life. That's not real life. There should be more. There should be equal. There are equal amounts of boys and girls on the planet. Yeah. So that that role. And then when I worked in the scene shop, it had been all men and 1 woman, and they called her the girl. And then I came along, and I was nicknamed the other girl.
So no names. You're just the girl and the other girl.
The girl and the other girl. Mm-hmm.
Nice. That's really nice. No identity.
No, except eventually, apparently, she got so pissed off about that her identity was being shared that then I became the artist, which is cool for me. But
she didn't want anybody else to be the other girl. She wanted to be the girl, and then not even be called by her name. She wasn't mad enough to say like, I have a name. Just don't call her the other girl. And that's I don't even know what to say about that.
I know. Yeah, and she was one of my greatest teachers because she was miserable all the time, and I just saw all these blessings in her life. Like she was a single mom, but she owned a house. She had 2 beautiful children. Like she had this great job and. A really cushy job, and she was paid really well, and she was miserable. She was miserable all the time, and when I started getting along with her and being able to commiserate, it was such a slap in the face that I went, oh my God, I am becoming just as miserable as she is. I have got to turn this around. Yeah. And there was some line in Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life about choosing to be happy. And I realized right then and there that I had one of these moments. I've had a few of those moments where I swear, like, there's like the shaft of light and the butterflies and the, birds are flying around me. And that was a moment in this back room. There's piles of fabric for all the scenery things. I had this big drafting table. I was really dusty and grimy and, it was a scene shop. And yet there's this moment of like, Kristy, this is it. Are you going to choose to be happy? Yeah. And I was like, yes, I'm going to choose to be happy. And I'm going to choose to feel adored. And he's not capable of that, let alone me feeling safe in his presence. And a divorce happened. Our house sold. Like everything just flowed. And right before that, people would come to my home. Like our friends would come who had been coming and when people, I swear there was an X on the floor, and they'd stop and say, did you get new furniture? And be like, no. And we're like, what do you do? Like people, and friends would stay. Like it was funny. Like friends would suddenly like stay later, and they'd be like, I'll just sleep over. And like friends were just like crashing on the couch, and they lived 10 minutes away, but they're like crashing on the couch. And they're like, I'm doing this feng shui thing. And they would say, like, I don't care what it is. Like, just come make my house feel good. And that cracked something open in me when somebody said, come make my house feel good too. And it was like, whoa. And I started doing it.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is back in the 1900s. I mean, I started this in 1997.
Wow.
In New Jersey, like before the internet.
Right. Near Atlantic City.
Right. This is not the hub of enlightenment here, all due respect.
But it seems like you're just like your energy completely changed by these choices that you made. And it's almost like, to me, like listening to your story about this other woman, like sometimes I feel like we see people who are the lesson, where it's like, okay, I don't want to be that person.
Right.
And so in order to, what do I need to do to not be that person, to not be, like you're saying, not be miserable, not be whatever. And luckily for you, you did make these choices. And did choose to be happy, and then when you say feng shui the way you say it, it sounds like I'm ordering it off a Chinese menu. Like, I'll have the Mushu Pan and the feng shui. So, but I mean, like, you almost didn't even know what you had your hands in, but it magically changed things, and not only in your life, but obviously the people around you felt it and saw it, and wanted it for themselves. How awesome is that?
I'm getting chills, actually. Thank you. Yes. And it occurred to me as you were saying that about this woman who will remain unnamed. It's that going back to the bad idea. It's like she was the bad idea, right? It's like, you gotta love a bad idea because it shows you what exactly, like, the complete opposite. Like, it's not that, it's this. So it was like, oh my God, I don't want that. I have to choose this.
Yeah.
So, jazz hands.
Yeah, and I've had that. I actually had that years ago where I had an unnamed person in my life that I looked at, and they were older than me, and they were very unhappy, what I considered a very unhappy relationship, and I was like, I don't want to be that person in however many years. I don't want to stay in an unhappy marriage and be that person. So yeah, sometimes these are our best teachers, our best kick in the pants, even, if you want to call it that.
Totally. Even my ex-husband, I mean, it's like, thank you. He taught me I needed to learn to love myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as unglamorous as being divorced at 27, 28 is, it gave me this time, and another thing that really was the breaking point was that I got to be a part through this feng shui. Actually, that master, I really want to honor her as a master. She was a wisdom keeper for a Native American tribe, and so she had first come. She was a psychotherapist, and then she studied like the medicine wheel and was using the medicine wheel in people's homes, and then she came across feng shui, and it was like, oh, this is the same thing, which then it taught me. So I've learned like the Native American process of, so there's that layer, which took me on this whole journey of going, well, who else has something like this? If there's Native Americans and there's Chinese, oh my gosh, there's the Indians with Vastu, and oh my gosh, every religion and indigenous culture has an ancient way of living in harmony with their environment. And it's interesting because they always talk about Chinese, feng shui is 5,000 years old. Well, yeah, that's the time of the goddess. Like, that's the time that we were more in a matriarchal time. Oh yes, this was formed by women, looking at how we can live in our homes and have it. Our homes don't have to be this center of drudgery, of responsibility. It can, part of what I just feel like my journey is to share the possibility of having our homes be these magical places for us and tools for transforming our lives.
I love that, and especially because I don't know that it doesn't seem that many of us think of our homes that way. Like, you want your home to be your security and your safe place and your comfort, your comfortable place, your comfort zone. But to take it to that level that you're talking about, I don't think a lot of us think of our homes that way.
No, we don't. Which is part of me is like so sad. Like, oh,
yeah.
That way. But then part of me is like, I get to share this.
Shouldn't be the best place? Shouldn't they really be the best place that you're just happy and glowing and love being in?
Yes, and being cheered back to. Yeah,
and also on the level of having it support us in our joy, in our abundance, and in all these things.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've learned that I've just in the past few years have been doing is thanking my home, thanking my art studio, thanking and telling it that I love you, and giving it and I think people probably are like, what? That sounds crazy, but but why not show appreciation for the place that you live, for heaven's sakes, for the place that you create?
Yes. Well, you also have a very unique experience with what home is, because you lost a home.
Right.
Everything. I mean, that's profound. That is so profound.
And it really did, and I don't want to take away from your story at all, but we are coming up just this Sunday. Halloween will be 5 years from when that happened. It's our 5 year. It did happen on Halloween morning, which I don't even want to analyze that, but it's interesting the benefits that have come from that, but also the changes in a little bit of attitude and mentality as far as some things that you really maybe hang on to, possessions that really mean a lot, that once they're gone, I mean, for me, there are things that they're just gone.
Yeah.
And I can't go back and replace them, but I can, move on with my life and be grateful for the things that have come from that. From that big, that's one of my, a funny thing happened on the way to my life experiences. But and wanting, in fact, you'll probably appreciate this, when we have a home in New Jersey, and we also now have a home in Michigan. We split our time. And when we bought our home in Michigan, we bought it furnished. But what I literally didn't realize until right before we were closing, I did the walkthrough and I was like, these people have left a lot of, they still have a lot of their personal items here. What aren't they going to come and take them? And as it turned out, no, we were literally buying all the things, not just the furniture. So, I mean, I had been making a list, getting ready, on the plane, making a list of, okay, buy cleaning things, buy brooms, buy mops, buy whatever it is. And I didn't have to. And like there are, wonderful kitchen appliances that we purchased with the house, tablecloths and decorating things. But one of the things that came with the house as well, there are just bookshelves in our master bedroom and in another one of the bedrooms, the bedroom that I'm sitting in that's now an office. There were tons of books, art books, beautiful books, hardbound books, like, the original hardbound Roots, Right. And so we sorted through a few of them a couple years ago and gave them away to different places, like the little libraries or the different places that we could, ask friends. But literally just this week, I did a huge decluttering of the books. And gave them. We still have more in our bedroom, but in this room, I gave them to one of the local libraries, and it just changes. But there was this level of like wanting to honor maybe the people that were here before, and also appreciation for the books that were here. A lot of the art books have gone to my art studio for inspiration. Yeah. And so I feel like those had a good purpose. They kept speaking to me in a way, and I was like, I can't let go of these art books, but these other books that, I think sometimes we think, well, maybe I'll read that one at some point. No, I'm not going to read it. It's not going to happen. And so hopefully, but like you, I mean, I know the value of decluttering and, changing things and changing the space. And it finally, like, it was almost like I'm finally ready to make this space more mine.
Yeah.
And it took this long. It took 4 years for me to feel like I'm ready to make it. And there was a different desk in here. We moved that desk. We're going to give that desk away. It changes everything. And I know that better than I do.
Totally honoring that. Yeah. And it takes as long as it takes. Like I call us sentimental savers, because there are the people who are minimalists and can live with very little, although sometimes clutter is stuff that really stands in the way of our joy and our self-expression. And so you can have a minimal home, and to me, it can make you absolutely miserable. Like everything in that can be triggering all kinds of negative connotations and memories, and it can feel awful, as opposed to having a home that's a maximist. I think of myself as a maximist because I am creative. I love to have lots of inspiration around me, and I love to create with lots of different things. So I have stuff. And then I'm also just more right brain. You know, our right brain is that creative, non-linear, colorful, emotional party, where the left brain is that 1, 2, 3. And people who live more in their left brains, it makes it very easy to like walk in the front door and put their shoes away and put the keys away, and everything goes in their place just so, as you know, 1, 2, 3. And as opposed to the, you know, right brain that's going, I feel so excited and happy, and oh my God, I'm terrified of this new thing, and oh, purple and squirrel and elephants and, you know, 45, all at the same time. So yeah, so I ended up, right now, I've been talking a lot about decluttering, because this work I started doing from about 1997 to about 2007, and then I moved cross country from New York. I moved to the Jersey Shore, and then moved back to New York City, and I moved to San Diego. So I moved cross country, my health crashed, the economy crashed, and I just was like, I had to step away for a while. And then I started coming back little by little. And the last time I was doing it, it was towards the end that I started noticing people kept saying to me over and over, I can't have you come to my home until I declutter it. One woman said, I have been working on my house for 3 years, getting it ready for you to.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, oh, we are, and I happen, there's something in my whatever charts, I don't know, I was conceived apparently when my parents, sorry, mom and dad, if you're listening to this, but I was conceived when they were moving from Oklahoma to Rhode Island, where I was born. My dad was in the Army. He was drafted. And so I've moved a lot, but I think that the part of the bigger scheme was moving a lot makes me have to figure out how to live in a new space all the time. And in those single years, I moved quite a bit. And I realized I'd always put off packing till the end. Like, oh my gosh, I was always packing up until like I had to turn the keys in kind of thing. And I
just have one more box.
I'm so excited. Shove it all, let me in the bag and just shove it. And I realized, I started going like, why is this so hard? And I started figuring out all the different ways that I was getting distracted. You know, like I'd ping pong around a room and go like, oh, I'm going to do there, I'd go over there, and I'd work for 3 hours, and then I feel like I had nothing to show for it. And then I'd take, you know, the pen to the other room, and then I'd get distracted for 2 hours. And then I'd walk in and I go, I don't even know where to start. So all the different ways I was getting caught up, I figured out practical and kind of metaphysical, energetic ways to help me move through a room. And it helped me pack, and it helped me declutter, and it helped me just clean up and tidy. And so I found I wasn't as panicked about, because as creatives, we have these ebbs and flows. Like, we're in a creative process and we're all right brain. You can't stop that and start cleaning up, because then you're shifting into the left brain. It was like, ah! So I know that when I'm done exploding, I can clean up. And looking at what my stuff also means to me, I also studied a lot about how the brain worked, not realizing that there was something off, but I couldn't figure out what it was. So I did a lot of study on how the brain works, and through that, understanding how our brains are affected by our environments. Because everything that we see, we think after a while, oh, I don't notice that thing. Actually, we do. Our brain apparently can only hold about 7 thoughts at a time, and then they don't disappear. They go pushed back into the subconscious, where they're repeated over and over again. And then they become neural pathways, actual like physical parts of our brain, which is what creates our belief systems and our values, and that's what empowers the actions that we take in our life. So by programming our environment to speak to us with what we want, with the intentions and metaphors, we can literally change our brain wiring.
I love this. I love this.
It's so simple.
Because that's it. Like, I mean, imagine, I mean, to me, I'm imagining like when you walk through the door and it's peaceful, like okay, peace, calm,
Right.
versus like you walk in and there's your pile of mail and there's your, whatever, like my kids are grown, but the kids' school papers that you need to sort through, all the notes that came home and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to get to that later. I'm going to get to that. I'm big on I'm going to get to that later as far as paperwork. And then when I do need to go find it, I'm a pile maker. I confess I'm a pile maker. And now I'm looking through the pile for that one bill that I know it's here. I know it's here, and then I can't find it. But I mean, I am a little bit more organized sometimes than, like, in the house in New Jersey. I'm a little more organized with the bills. I tend to, and this is why this office is now really good, because I'm not making piles that I'm putting in the bedroom where they don't go. They need to be in. They need to be in the office where I can like have an organization of here's the bills. Like I tend, before that it was terrible. So I love this idea of being able to walk in your space and it is what you want it to be, whatever that is, that you're able to help people create in their homes. I love it.
I just do. Because there's the one level of like, oh my gosh, my house feels so good, but then there's the magical stuff that happens because it feels good, because we feel better, and we don't have to have a pristine home, or as my dad calls it, museum grade. Like we can, like we can have, being conscious of even what our piles are about. Like, okay, is that pile there full of adulting heavy stuff to deal with, or is it a pile because you just had some kind of great creative explosion in your life and that's what's left over from it? There's I had somebody say a few months ago, say, well, your clutter is because of a life well lived and mine is because of despair and neglect. broke my heart. But it really does. I'm doing a decluttering course right now and we're talking about like, what kind of clutter is it? Like, let's just even name it, because so often there's stuff hiding in it. Like I had this pile of vintage magazines, the big ones, like the Life magazines from the 1920s to the 1960s. And after I got divorced, I had this little studio and I kept moving them around and they were just a mess. I'm like, and finally I got curious, like, why am I not just tidying that up? Why am I not dealing? So I flipped through it. My marriage license was in there.
Oh my gosh.
2 copies of it. I wasn't ready to deal with it until I was ready to deal with what was in that pile. My subconscious mind knew exactly what was in there and was like, we are not ready. And even when it did pop up, I was like, and I called a friend who was divorced and I'm like, what do I do? And she goes, okay, look, you have to save one for 7 years, but the other one you can destroy. And I created a whole ritual, I was like, ripped it up, I release you with love, and I burned it and the whole, thing, and I took the ashes down to the beach and the whole thing.
Yeah, perfect.
I wasn't ready for it until I was ready for it. Right. Then I had another box. We moved into this place, and there's the one cliched picture of the mom holding the baby in the hospital. I had my daughter in a birth center, but holding her right after she was born. I didn't have a picture of that, and I even emailed my doula in California. My daughter was born in California. I was like, where? How come I don't have one of those pictures? And at the same time, nobody. Well, there's this one box that I knew I didn't have wall space for all the pictures in it, but I know we probably won't be here forever, so I might figure out where to put those pictures at some point. And I was just like, I was in no rush to unpack it, but it kept nagging. It was like, open me up. And I'm like, I don't have time for you. No, open me up. I don't have time for you. Open me up. And finally I'm like, fine. I don't know why I'm opening you up. I don't need you at all. I don't. There's no room right now. I'm not with plaster walls. They're not that easy to put a nail into.
Yeah, you can't hang anything anyway.
Like, oh my God. Well, wouldn't you know, in there was this Mother's Day gift with a picture of me holding my daughter hours after she was born. What I had been looking for, couldn't find it. There it was, kept nagging at me. So there's two ways. Sometimes, we find stuff that, we put off decluttering because we're just not ready to deal with what's in the pile emotionally. It's like what's under the clutter. And then there's times where it's like, oh, treasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things that I tend to, not that we get so many catalogs in the mail like we used to, but I was always a big one for, Land's End, I want to look at this later. I'm sure there's a shirt in here I'm going to want. Let me put that here and I'll look at it. Oh, Williams Sonoma, let me look at that later. And next thing you know, I've got this huge pile, and I go back and it's like January, no, don't need January anymore. Here we are. Like that's a little outdated. So yeah, there's that pile of like wanting to see the things, wanting to do the shopping, but never got to it. So maybe that's a good thing, because you probably obviously didn't need what was in there anyway, or I would have gotten it. So
you also might look at it as that pile of magazines, for the time that it was there, was a vibration of stuff that you were like, ooh, maybe there's something in there. Like, so even getting, there still might be, like, if it's there and it's piled up and it's not hurting anybody and it's not, you're not tripping over it and breaking a leg or, it's not like, to honor that maybe for a little while, it's like, okay, I'm not running out to the store, especially during COVID. Like, maybe it's just fun having the vibration of all that beautiful stuff and possibilities.
Yeah.
It's all how we look at things. And I love transforming things. Like, you have that really fun picture behind you of this woman who's like, I almost feel like, she's flying off, and it's like she's letting go of what's, there's like this sense of like she's flying into the future and she's releasing what she doesn't need anymore. It's like there's kind of fun about that.
And whatever she's releasing, they're turning into these beautiful birds.
Right.
Like they're flying away, and it's beautiful. So yeah, I love that. I love it.
Yeah. We don't have to move stuff. I that's one of the things I love is we don't need to like buy a ton of new stuff. Like we can give new meaning to our stuff. Now sometimes there's just stuff that it just takes a lot of energy to overcome what that's about. And another thing that I think its time has not come yet is how profound our homes impact us. Like if you're going to therapy and you're having some big breakthrough and then you come through home and the first thing you see is something that is part of the trigger of what you're healing from, a picture of something of that person or the thing that reminds you of or something, maybe there's a blanket that you had a huge fight on and your relationship ended while you were sitting on that blanket, that's all going to be triggers. We can meditate for an hour, open our eyes up and be triggered by something traumatic. So just learning to have that conversation with our home and listening to what everything is saying to us.
Yeah.
And then editing what we keep and what we let go of from that sparking joy is a brilliant starting point. But then we also want to look on the other side, like, is it triggering trauma?
Yeah.
Looking on the other side of it is that our stuff can, just as well bring up negative.
I imagine that can totally just be a subconscious thing that you're not even necessarily aware of, that, that was the blanket that we used to have our picnics on or whatever. And now I'm broke up with that guy. And it just keeps reminding me of that and dragging me back down or whatever it is. Like you said, it's, we don't even realize, which is why we need you to come in and help us to see these things and, to work on these things. But I love this story. I love your A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life story, because I feel like all the things in your life were puzzle pieces that fit together to bring you to this place of where you can, offer this incredible service to people, which is what was in your heart from the beginning. Like it just came full spiral to well, you needed all the pieces. You needed to get all the tools, put all the tools in your bag to get where, to where you could do this wonderful work in the world. I love it.
It's even funny because part of me even went, okay, in the scheme of things, why haven't I done more set design? Because that's like more of like make-believe homes. But it's like, I needed to do costume design to understand people more. I needed to understand motivations and evolutions and who the people, because we really have to, one of my favorite meetings is in the design process is you sit down with the director and you just hash out like who are each of these characters. We create the characters before the actors come along usually. I mean, unless you're like working with Julia Roberts or something, that she has a lot to say. But but in general, I've often been on casting because, some directors have said like, you understand the characters as much as I do because I've, the costumes are designed. We've figured out who the characters are before the play starts.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, is that something that you also kind of bring into what you do as far as like, who are the people living in the house? Do we have 2 and 3-year-olds, or do we have teenagers, or do we have both? And then we've got, the mom and the dad, and oh, there's a dog, and oh, there's a cat. Like all those things as well.
Oh yeah.
To consider all of the personalities in the home.
Yes, and what I've also found is that I've kind of found my own blend in Feng Shui and Chinese medicine and astrology. They work with 5 elements, where Western astrology is 4 elements. So, but the 5 elements has this beautiful cycle, destructive cycle and constructive cycles. And I've kind of blended the two because a lot of people, Western humans that I work with, are more resonating with their astrology, with their elements, it seems like, on the Western side. So I kind of blend that. So looking at the different elements that the people in a home are resonating with and seeing how they might balance, like wood can feed fire. Well, or, fire and water can make some steam, or the water's putting out the fire, earth can stop things up. So there's that of also bringing just a sense of nature in the natural world into our not so natural homes that are built. The only, straight lines are man-made. Nature doesn't make straight lines.
Yeah. That's incredible. I mean, that's an amazing, like all of the tools that you have and everything that you're bringing in. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. I also got called to study different healing modalities a long time ago, a couple of master levels, to be able to, I haven't done a lot of work on humans. I do it on spaces. So we heal the spaces because, everything is a vibration. So, I've done some very intense work with homes that have had like suicides in them. Yeah. That kind of, I would imagine like rebuilding a home that's been on fire, that's caught on fire, homes that have had domestic violence in them. There's a lot to the homes that they hold it.
Well, and I think that was one of the things for me, at least, with our home in Michigan, was that nobody died in this home, but one of the previous owners, the husband, had passed away, which is one of the reasons they were. From what I understand, they were going to sell the house anyway, but then he passed away, which is I believe, a big part of why so many things were still here. There was some level of I believe the wife not wanting to deal with sorting through all the things. And I think that, like you're saying, like when you were talking about the emotional attachment to things, it's like, I don't have an emotional attachment to these things, but there was some level of like feeling like I didn't want to just throw these people lived here, and I didn't want to just get rid of all their things. And I don't even know what that is, because it wasn't my attachment, it wasn't my own personal attachment, but there was some level of it. So you can imagine that, in a house where there was real trauma, happening, that energy would still be there.
Yeah.
And for you to be able to clear that out. And I know there's a lot of people who, don't want to buy a house that has had, even maybe somebody who, passed away from natural causes, not necessarily even a horrific event. But you had to clear that out so that somebody could feel, even for the house to be able to sell, to, have somebody want to buy it, So incredible work. And
it is. Yeah, I worked with a realtor. She said, I just need you to come to this house because nobody's coming to look at it. And I can't tell what's wrong with it. And she told me this, and it was like, the house had been empty for over a month. And the family, I guess, had gone back to a country that they were from for vacation, and something happened in the family and they needed to stay, and they decided they were going to stay at the house. So they left as if they were going on vacation for a week and never came back to the house.
Oh my goodness.
And so, like the toothbrush was still out, there was a towel on the floor, and it was just like, I could just feel the house. They had built the house and put all these extra things, upgrades into the house, like green choices for the house and stuff. And it was like, I just felt like the house, I'm like, this house is so sad. It's been abandoned. You think that there were children that have grown up in this house. It was so lovingly built.
Yeah.
And then it was just abandoned.
There was like no closure for the house. There was no closure with the people packing and saying goodbye and going through that process.
There's so many ways that our homes impact us. I had a client years ago. She was on 3 different sleeping medications, and she still couldn't sleep through the night. She had a room with every rom-com ever made, because she'd get up in the middle of the night and watch rom-coms. And I walked into her bedroom with her, and I kind of, people say, I can't see people's auras, but I can feel things. I read homes. So I said, so tell me about those pictures on the wall over your bed. And she instantly was like, my brother took them. I'm like, okay, they're beautiful pictures. She said, yes. I said, so what's the deal with your brother? I hate my brother. I hate my brother. And it was like, it was like, whoa.
My goodness.
And I'm like, okay, can we take them down? They are beautiful photographs, but maybe you can even pass them on to another family member. But I don't think they have a place in your home. And so, we moved the bed around so it was in a more comfortable place where she could see the door and feel more safe. And we, across from the bed, she had a whole bunch of pictures. She had done beautiful, like advocacy work in Europe. And she had done some beautiful work, and she had pictures of this beautiful life that she had lived across from her bed. And within a couple of months, she was off all 3 sleeping medications and was sleeping through the night.
Wow.
And then she moved into a retirement community, and she's like, okay, here are the floor plans. Which one can I have the bedroom just like this bedroom? So, I helped her design, pick out the house that was going to be just that, where the bedroom could be set up just the way it was, because she slept through the night. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, you had your hatred right over the head while you're sleeping. That can't be a good thing.
How are you supposed to fall asleep when you're that angry?
That's probably one of the last things she looked at before she got in bed. If it's right over her headboard,
you got it.
You said, even if it's subconscious, even if you're not acknowledging, oh, there's my brother that I hate's pictures,
right.
No, it's just there.
It's subconscious. And so, and also you have to think, when our brain has a thought, the body has the emotion, the feelings are physical feelings. So her body was having that whole response every time she walked into her bedroom.
Oh, incredible.
It is. And even also in the bedroom, fertility. I mean, in marriage, you walk in, I've heard of a couple of times, even, from other practitioners that I've been friends with, couples that there's infidelity, and there's a huge picture of 3 birds sitting on a branch over the bed, and they've had problems with cheating. I would say there's a fertility. I'm like, no, fertility. I've also seen that also. I think almost, as far as I can remember, every couple that has wanted to conceive and has had infertility issues. When we've worked on their bedroom, they have conceived.
Wow.
And so often the bedroom, they're focused on the baby and not the conception. I'm like, you've got to take, they're like cute little baby, like the Annie Geddes pictures of all the babies. I'm like, it's not about the baby. You need to create a romantic boudoir. You've got to like focus on the conception and the joy of celebrating just the two of you. Get the pictures of the older kids out. They don't need to watch you have sex. Like,
yeah. Literally, like, yeah, really. Like, no, get it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just fascinated by the work that you do, and I'm sure we could just go on and on and on. But like I said, I just feel like everything that you, and I think this is the case in a lot of situations where, and this is why, this is part of why I created, a funny thing happened on the way to my life, because I have had several experiences that, and I think a lot of us have, where, and it's not necessarily even a bad thing. Like, there can be a positive thing that took our life in a different direction. But I love looking back at your story, your experiences, and seeing where the path, maybe at the time you were like, why am I going this way?
Right.
But once it unfolds and you look back, this is why, because this work that you're doing is so incredible and so important and so freeing for people and healing for people and amazing. So I think maybe this is a good place to wrap up. But before we go, I would like you to tell people where you can be found. Where's the easiest way to find you? And, if somebody wants to work with you, where can they, find that, find you online? Yeah.
Well, I spell my name Kristy, Kristy, and my last name is Iris, Iris. So it's pretty much Kristy Iris anywhere. Facebook. I've got a lovely Facebook group. It's free, and we do a lot of work together. So that's Haven of My Enlightenment, because Haven of My Enlightenment is home, HOME.
And your Instagram is also
Kristy Iris. Yeah.
And you will know when you come across Kristy Iris that this is the correct Kristy Iris. She has a lot of beautiful, colorful images, and all of her posts are just full of beautiful color. And you'll know it's Kristy. She's the colorful one that brings joy. So
color. Thank you. Yes. And can I add one thing? There's a technical term that I've learned from Buckminster Fuller. He was a futurist, about the funny thing on the way to my life. It's called procession. He talked about it, and trying to remember, he talked about it as a honeybee. And a honeybee thinks it's the whole purpose in life is to gather nectar for the honey, to get honey for the hive. So the honeybee just does its little thing, going straight off. That's its path right there. It does not realize that this whole 45-degree angle is that it is making fruits and vegetables possible around the entire world, because it is cross-pollinating. It has no idea that its other purpose, even though it thinks it's going for this, it impacts the whole world by cross-pollinating for us. And it's called procession.
That is beautiful. And that's it. That's it. That's the message. Like, we may not know in our moment, in our focus, that by just something happening, an experience that might let us go sideways, lead us in a different direction, we'll have a totally different story for us. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's what it reminds me of, what you're doing. I love it.
Thank you so much. Well, again, I am so honored and grateful for you to have shared with us today. And be sure to find Kristy. Look for her color. She's there, and she'll bring you home. Yeah, exactly. I need to bring you into my home and have you help me. So
that'd be so much fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for listening.
Yes,
Everybody's
thank
here
you
and
everyone
watching.
for listening to our episode.
Thank you for listening to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life podcast. For more information, visit my website at www.lauramuirhead.com.